We're addressing the issues that affect so many in our community. I know maybe you've had this conversation at home with your loved ones. Well, we're going to have it right here, talking about the abuse, sex trafficking, and the violence that goes on in our community.
I'm here with Shanda Roberts and Shanika Ampah. Thank you, ladies, for joining me. You're welcome. So where are we right now? What is this? What area is this of South Miami?
We're in the city of South Miami, where I actually grew up, where we call this the Creek.
The Creek?
Yeah, the Creek.
We're talking about sex trafficking and domestic violence. These are two topics that are very dear to your hearts. I know that from talking to you previously, and I'm glad that you decided to share your story so that other women and men who may be going through the same thing, maybe they'll have the courage and also the interest in seeking help. But I think it's important for you to share your story so that people can identify a little bit of what happened to you, and maybe that'll help some people who are watching.
Right. I think so, and I think the fact that we brought it back to the communities, because those are the things that's happening in our community.
Shanika, for you, how old were you the first time you were abused?
I was sexually abused at 9 by my brother, but then to be in this community, I ran away at 11. So that's where I got all of the reputation that I gained, the negative reputations, the titles that people gave me.
What type of titles? What were some of the names that people called you?
The worst name that I would say, this whole community made this nickname, and they called me Fucky Wucky.
Fucky Wucky?
Mm-hmm.
And how old were you when they labeled you Fucky Wucky or called you Fucky Wucky?
12.
You were 12.
Yeah, so I walked this community. If I went to the corner store, most everybody, and I think you will see the corner store, I had to pass adult men that titled me that.
Okay, so let me get this straight. At the age of 12, your own community where you grew up called you a little girl Fucky Wucky.
Yeah, because that's why I say them. They knew, like, if you knew that name, you knew what was happening. You knew about the gang rapes. You knew what these apartments meant. You knew that I would be in one of these apartments, but no one, not even the adult women, stood up for me.
Growing up, I saw other young girls who were sexually active. I remember being in junior high school, and a couple of girls were like in 7th grade, 8th grade, and they were already engaging in sexual intercourse. And as a child, I just thought that was a choice they were making because that's what they wanted to do. And they were called being fast. And the older I got, I realized some of these young women and young boys and men have been abused, and so their childhood, they've been robbed of their childhood. Their normal development was compromised, and for a lot of them, like Shanika, the only thing they knew was engaging in sexual activity or being the victim. Or other people taking advantage of them. And Shanika mentioned that being called Fucky Wucky by grown adults in her neighborhood, labeling her Fucky Wucky because she was engaging in sexual activity with older men. You would think the responsible thing to do would be to report it, to call the police, to call DCF, to tell her mother, to pull her aside and tell her that she doesn't have to do these things. Again, to report these grown men, that's sexual abuse. And then, to make matters worse, as an adult, to run into one of those adults who labeled her Fucky Wucky as a young child, to then call her Fucky Wucky again and think that it's funny. It's not funny.
And I don't want them to say nobody wakes you up on your birthday and say, good morning, happy birthday, you turned 12 today, or good morning, beautiful, it's your 14th birthday. Nobody says that to you. Like, in the life, you know a new year came because that's party time. You know it's right. New Year's Eve because we party all night, you do whatever all night, but when it's your birthday and occasions that should have solidified a new year for you, you don't remember if I was 12 or 13. And because you work all night one day into another night, it's something different. So I tell people, don't discredit a survivor story because they don't remember if it was 12 or 13, because they all kind of blend. Right.
Yeah, so you're identifying with what Shanda said, that there's times where you can't recall anything.
Yeah, you can't recall. Like I know when, like, the abuse happened at 9. But then I know around 11, that's where everything. But when I went out and actually had a pimp and everything, and you living in this house with everybody, you don't remember. Okay, yeah, I had turned 14, then I had turned 15. I don't even remember if I turned 14 in Miami-Dade County or if I was in another state.
What were those birthdays like, being abused? So when it was time for your birthday and you were, like you said, you just said you were living in a house with a lot of other people, as in a lot of other women and girls?
Yeah, a lot of other women. That's why I was relating to the R. Kelly thing of the whole cult, the cult culture, because it's so many women living in there, and so you don't get to say, hey, this is my birthday. Nobody reminds you. I didn't have a birthday party until I got out in the life. Like my kid's father, when I was turning, I think 20 something, he bought me a cake. Like nobody bought me a cake out there.
So prior to that 20 something birthday, you never had a cake for your birthday?
Never.
So you were telling me that you were first abused at the age of 9, and that was by a stranger, friend, family member?
My brother. That was by my brother. And I always had resentment for my mom, but then like in my late 20s, I found out that she was also the victim of sexual abuse. So like she didn't have a voice. So when I'm speaking, it's for the people who don't have their voice because of the family secrets. What happens in our family stays in our family, and we're so loyal to that family secret, even though it's killing one person.
Right. So your mother was abused, and you found out in your 20s
in my
that
20s,
she too
yeah.
was sexually abused? Or?
Yeah, sexually abused. And so for a long time I felt like she should have done something, but now I'm looking at she didn't know what to do.
How long were you abused? From age 9 until?
The trafficking, well, with my brother, I think for about 2 years, and then I ran away. But then by that time, I was already like in the community being sexually abused by the older men in my community.
So you ran away at what age?
I ran away like 11, and when I think about it, it wasn't really that I ran away. It's just that, and this is what I tell parents, always be open to whatever your child going to tell you. In this community not too far from here, I ended up being gang raped in this apartment. And
at what age?
About 11, and that lasted throughout the night. And so when I fell asleep, I woke up there, but I couldn't go home. I didn't feel like I can go home, so it was just easier just to stay out because I didn't want to face my mom.
Did you stay there in that home where you were gang raped?
I didn't stay there for a long period of time, because then that's when they just started trading me off. Like more people, everybody, the drug dealers would just trade me off. I don't know what was the game for them, or if it was just that they got a title of being cool because they had this girl that was just easy.
And by girl you mean this 11-year-old girl?
Yeah.
12-year-old girl?
Yeah.
And is that where your nickname Fucky Wucky
that's where the nickname originated from. And when I talk about porn, because I was taught to watch porn and then perform the things that I saw in the porn.
At what age?
11, 12, 13. That's why I was groomed into knowing what to do sexually by watching porn.
By these men?
By these men.
And by grown men, you mean 20s and 30s?
30s and 40s.
30s and 40s.
20s, 30s, just older than what I was. No one that was in school age with me.
And that was here in this community?
Yeah, this community, the city of South Miami. And when I talk about the responsibility, because after they finished here, they took me to Goulds, they took me to Homestead. So the responsibility of them taking care of the girl, and I didn't live far from here. I lived like 3 streets over, and so they knew where I lived. They knew my parents. They could have taken me home. They could have knocked on the door and said, hey, here's your daughter. And so when I talk about runaway girls, most runaway girls didn't run from their neighborhood into another state. Most times they're still in their neighborhood, but who's speaking up in their community?
Do you think your mom came looking for you? Did family members look for you?
It was, my mom always looked for me. She always, and it was not even the police officers that looked for me as much as my mom did. But I know it got tedious and tiresome for her. Probably was some of the things that like deteriorated her health, because my mom passed at 49 years old. So
how old were you when your mom passed away?
24.
Why couldn't she find you?
even in that, my mom, there's times that I was within my house, but the abuse didn't stop. The sexual abuse of my community didn't stop. And when I talk about that, I want people to know, when you say human trafficking, that doesn't mean that kid is not inside their house. Sometimes you're being trafficked and prostituted and still going home. But there's not even enough conversation going on about what's happening to you. And there's not enough resources to even help you. And that's one of the reasons why I did want to come back to this community, because if a community police officer, because after I was taught to watch the porn, then the videotaping of me became the porn. And so the sex tapes.
Wait, they recorded you on tape, and then they showed these tapes to other people?
To other people.
And this is you as a 12-year-old child, 11, 12, 13, being recorded by grown men, performing sexual acts.
With their faces in it. And so at the point where, to the point that my police officer, the community police officer, actually came into possession of the tape. And I remember him stopping me one day when I walked across one of these streets, and he said, I saw that tape. And he told me that he saw it, but it was more in a lustful way, that he saw it, but not saying, I saw that tape, it was so bad, what could I do for you? No assistance was offered to me.
So he did not report it, a police officer?
He didn't report it. And so one of the things I'm working on is trying to see if I can see him face to face today, one of these days, so I can tell him his failure to serve and protect included his failure to serve and protect me from many more years of what could have just stopped whatever trauma that I was going through in the moment. Because he had an ability. He had an ability to do something. I know where he got that tape from, because one of the drug dealers had gotten busted, and that tape was in his car. So that's how I know that tape didn't go into evidence with that drug bust.
How long did they do this to you? How long did this last?
In my community, it lasted for several years, but again, they traded me off. So someone from here had a clique, another friends in Ghouls, and I only know that it's Ghouls now because I see landmarks when I go to the community of Ghouls, and those guys did the same thing, and then those guys shared me off to guys in Homestead, and I would know that it's Homestead because at that age you didn't know. We didn't even have all these little cities. Everything was Miami. We were taught that I lived in Miami, Florida. I didn't know Ghouls, Homestead, or little entities of communities. But they traded me off for whatever reason, just sharing me like a common tool. But the guys from Homestead they eventually one day took me to Southwest 8th Street. And that's what we know as the track. Is lined with hotels. And they left me at a motel there. And when I came out, that's when I met my first person that titled themselves as a pimp and was considered what we will say a trafficker.
How old were you?
I can remember, I think about 14, that I met this guy, and he had about 3 women with him, and they were adult women as well. So when I think about that, I'm like, wow, they probably had their own trauma, because nobody took the motherly role to say, no, that's a kid.
You shouldn't be here, go home.
Yeah, nobody. No, they never said that. They just taught me the game. And
the game, what do you mean they taught you?
When I say the game, they taught me about how to get money, how to perform oral sex, and they said, you're not the trick, you just tricking people. So they taught me things like, when you're in a car and you're giving oral sex, pull his pants all the way to the floor, and while you're giving oral sex, take his wallet and jump out the car and run with it. The area of Southwest 8th Street, and this is the hotel that I originally met what was my first pimp. Besides all the community abuse, this person actually took the title of a pimp. And on this back street, which is not the main street of Southwest 8th Street, it's a cut through, and so most girls usually stand in the back of this hotel, and people know to drive around and pick up girls in the back.
I've been doing it for like 17 years. Like I said, 15 was with a pimp. Now I'm by myself because he was on the news for human trafficking, and I don't have nobody, I have no family, nothing here. Yeah. And I found this house down there. They had a room for $150 a week, and I paid for an efficiency on the side for $150 a week. But I think her story's beautiful, and I'm glad that you're out of it and that you're doing something about it. It's amazing. God bless you.
Yeah. I can be strong for myself, but it's other people.
You just changed her. You just changed her life. You know that? Because you just showed her. You just showed her that people are paying attention to that. You just did something for her. You just did something for her.
And she wanted that. She walked over here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes they just want someone to know that they're there to help them.
Yes. They saw someone new. They saw someone new
Right.
and someone who looked like people pick up on energy and spirit. So she felt it. She felt it.
You know, I told you, I said, this is where, you know, they working in the back. I know that because this is where we work. Just to come back here and see the two of them working.
Right. And you said it on that other interview and you said it too. Sometimes women, when you want to help them and you want them to get out right now, they're not ready. So it takes a little bit of chipping here and chipping there and talking to them. And so what you just did now may have started the process for her.
Yeah. She's in jail for 15 years. I mean, that was her pimp for 15 years, and he's in jail for human trafficking.
Is that, she just said that?
Yeah, that's what she said. So they can prove and connect her to being a victim, so we can get her connected to the services for all survivors like UN. You know, she probably need her health services.